In the previous video on this channel, we looked at Nikon's final CCD DSLR released in 2009, Nikon D3000. Even though the D3000 is a very simple entry-level camera, I ended up liking it much more than I expected, and in the last 3 months I've been shooting with it more often than any other camera in my collection. And that made me curious, what was Canon actually up to in the same year? And that brought me to Canon 500D or Rebel T1i in the US. A camera that, at least on paper, looks like it was in another league. Better sensor, better technology in general, more features, same compact body and same price on today's market. So between this and the Nikon, this should be a clear winner, right? The time around 2009 was a turning point in photography. Smartphones were just starting to get somewhat decent. Camera manufacturers still experimented a lot with different technologies. The first mirrorless cameras were just starting to appear on the market. And these DSLRs were still the setup for anyone who wanted to take photography seriously, or at least get as close as possible. The Canon 500D was kind of a big deal. As I mentioned in my previous video, Canon pretty much skipped the CCD technology altogether, so this camera has a 15 megapixels CMOS sensor. I saw up to 12,800 live view, and for the first time in a Rebel series camera, 1080p Full HD video. Compare this to Nikon with its aging 10 megapixel CCD sensor, no live view and no video, and you see that the two manufacturers had very different approach to their cameras at the time. And again, Nikon's specs are much worse on paper, but here's the twist. I loved the Nikon D3000 and this Canon not so much. I bought my Canon 500D without the lens, so I initially went for the similar 18 to 55mm kit lens, which I really liked with the Nikon D3000. But in Canon's case, the kit lens is just honestly horrible. It does feel much more cheap and plasticky than the one from Nikon, does not have stabilization, but most importantly, I did not like the images it took at all. RAW files felt very clinical, sharpness and colors were somewhat okay, but for my taste the rendering just looked a bit too digital. And the JPEGs were even worse, especially in black and white. You could just immediately see that this is an entry-level camera from 2009. So here Nikon was just a clear winner and I was honestly just about to give up immediately. But then I discovered Canon's Pancake primes, the tiny 24 and 40mm f2.8 lenses. With these lenses, my experience just improved significantly straight away. The rendering turned out much better and Canon's colors finally showed their better side, and I especially liked Canon's faithful camera profile in Lightroom for the RAW files. focal length on both lenses is great as well. Because Canon's cameras have this 1.6 times crop compared to the usual 1.5x, the 24mm lens gives you a field of view close to 40mm, which is honestly my personal favorite. And the 40mm is about 65. Both lenses are insanely small, so the camera becomes very compact as well, and raw files are very sharp and have a decent room for editing, so this camera started to feel just a bit more modern than it actually is. So I could actually start to see Canon's appeal here. Still, there is something to the experience of shooting this camera that just feels a bit off to me. Even starting with the shutter sound, Canon has this very clinical, digital and somewhat unpleasant sound compared to the nice and clicky shutter of the Nikon. Also, the camera body itself, even though it has a nice grip and it's pretty comfortable to use, is just a bit polished and kinda round for my taste. On-off button is placed not very conveniently as well, so shooting with one hand is a bit more tricky than it should be. Then it does have a live view, which is probably nice to have in some situations. But of course, since it uses a different focusing mechanism, it is very slow. So in reality, I would probably just never use it. And its video capabilities get outdated very quickly, so your smartphone probably can take much better video at this point. So in the end, even though this Canon was objectively much better than Nikon in 2009, 16 years later, most of Canon's features get kinda outdated, and I would personally choose Nikon just for the feel and the experience. If the question though is whether you should get the Canon 500D in 2025, my answer would be maybe. If you want to focus on the results and have more room for post-editing while enjoying great compact lenses, the Canon 500D is still a good choice, especially if you're 100% sure in your motivation in photography. The Canon 500D just does not motivate or inspire you to take pictures, so you risk giving up on a hobby if your motivation is just not strong enough. One thing that I like about using these old cameras today is that sometimes this experience teaches you some lessons that are still important today. And for me, using these two cameras from 2009, one from Nikon and one from Canon, just made me realize once again that a camera is more than just a tool, and a camera is more than just its specs. Having the latest technology or more megapixels on your sensor does not automatically make you take more pictures or have better time with photography in general. This Canon 500D might be a better camera on paper, and you can technically achieve better results compared to the Nikon from the same year. But on a given day, if I want to just go out and have a good time taking pictures, I would probably still choose something from Nikon or Pentax with their old CCD sensors, or any other camera with a better feel than this Canon. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.